The first square we opened here in B was over here to the north, and you can see after just less than half a meter they came smack down on a large. We didn't, of course, know the date of the pavement, just coming to the top of it. The best way to get a date is by digging underneath it. So we came this direction and over to the west, and we're able to get underneath this pavement. Right here you can see the edge of the pavement. I need to point this direction. Here's the edge of the pavement right here. And you can see the soil layers underneath. The pottery we got out of this all dates apparently to the middle of what we call the Iron II period, maybe around the 8th century BC. So we had a good date for this. There was no younger pottery, no more recent pottery than the 8th century. This gave us a good date for this pavement. Now what is this pavement? There are several parallels in Israel, specifically at Tel Dan in the north of Israel and also at Tel Beersheba in the south. You have these ramps that come up the side of the side of the ruined city, and when they get to the top they turn inside the city. This is just basically a paved road into the ancient Iron Age city. This particular one is the first one probably like it in Transjordan, so we were quite excited to find it. But as you can see, it's not the only pavement here. After we dug underneath to date this, we kept going down. We ran into these stones here. They look like a thin wall. As we kept coming down, we came down upon a second pavement. You can see here it's almost a little over a meter from the top pavement clear down to this bottom pavement here. So this was an earlier road. We dug underneath it over in the side of the square, and we were able to find sherds from what we call the early Iron II, maybe the 9th or 10th century even BC. And so we actually have two Iron Age roads. This one was built first down here. It led into the Iron Age city of the 9th century. Apparently that city went out of use. It was either destroyed or abandoned. We don't know exactly what happened yet. But then they built a new road, maybe 100, 150 years later up here. It followed almost the same pathway on up to the city gateway. One interesting thing about these roads is most times the ancient people tried to build them so that when you were hiking up the road, you had to expose your sword arm to the city wall. Most people, it seems just like today, were right-handed. They carried their shield in their left. If they had to walk up the hill, going from their left to right, they were exposing their vulnerable side. Their shield was over here, and they would have their sword here, but no protection from the arrows on the wall. So most of the city planners tried to make this road or these roads come up in a direction that would expose the right-hand side to the city wall. And that's exactly what both of these Iron Age streets seem to do. So it's a nice example of Iron Age architecture. Now what we can do is look around the other side here and see where we were hoping to find our gate, but we didn't find that. Okay, naturally a pavement would be expected to come up and turn into a gateway, and so we decided this season to open up some new squares, which you can see in the background, looking for the gate complex of one of these two streets we saw a moment ago. Since the upper street was so close to the surface, we were afraid that it would be robbed out. And indeed that's the case. As we excavated down to about the level we'd expect the pavement, it was gone and there was no gate. Here's a little bit of the pavement right over here, but around it the stones have been robbed out. So we so far haven't had any success at finding the gate for the upper pavement. Down below, we did find these very large stones, and they were promising, and we even found this lower pavement, which may be just out of view, but there is a lower pavement down here. And this was very promising. We found this line of stones here, but we can't find anything else that would indicate we have a gatehouse or a tower or anything. And everything off in this direction, you can see in the background again about 4 squares. So far, we have found nothing. We found the gray ash layer that is associated with that lower pavement. But these are the only stones we've been able to find. Everything quits here. We don't know what happened yet. Perhaps just after the 9th century city went out of use, the stones were robbed, and maybe they were brought up and used in the later city, and then the stones from the later gatehouse were again robbed after it went out of use and taken somewhere else. So if the gate was ever located here, we haven't found it, it's gone. We have one more chance that the gate may be located more to the west, and perhaps next season Jim Fisher, the supervisor, will move that direction and see if we can locate the Iron Age city gate. It would be exciting because very few gates, in fact I'm not sure any gates really, maybe in the south have been found from that period. Maybe in Edom and Moab there might be a couple of examples, but up here in Ammon, Iron Age gates have not been exposed very much, if at all, and so we would like that opportunity. But if not, we'll take what we can get. We'll now go over to Field A and look at some large building complexes that seem to be coming up over there.
Yep.
We're in Field A now. This was a square that we opened the first season. We actually opened 2 squares to try and get a section across the tell. Just coming down a little less than a meter, we hit this big wall, and as we were digging down the side, you might even be able to make it out. We notice there's a foundation trench, a little bit of light soil. It's hard to see in this light, but coming down right to the middle of this wall, we carefully excavated the soil out of this foundation trench and looked at every single potsherd, and it all dated to the middle of the Iron II period, about the 8th century perhaps, about the same as the upper pavement we saw over in Field B. That wall goes down to about this level here, and then there's a different wall right underneath it, and we can even, it's impossible to see right now in this light, but there's a second foundation trench underneath. So what we have down here was an earlier wall underneath this wall. This is built of larger stones. We have very small flat stones down here for these lower courses. Again, the soil against in the foundation trench and underneath this showed this to be dated to about the early 9th century, almost to the Iron Age, Iron I period. 10th, 9th century, and it's about the same age as our lower pavement, so we are suspicious that we've got the same 2 phases in this square, in this wall, as we have over in Field B in the 2 pavements, both dating to middle and early Iron II. Underneath, as we went down a little bit further, we found some nice Iron I pottery between 1200 and 1000 BC. We're still having to get the exact dates of that, but it included the famous collar rim jars that are often associated with the Israelites, and carinated bowls and other forms typical of the earlier Iron Age, the Iron I period. We haven't found any architecture yet from that period, but we hope that as we continue excavating here at Jalul, we'll continue to go down and we'll bump into buildings from those earlier periods, and that'll illuminate an earlier phase of biblical history, hopefully, and perhaps under that we'll even find some late Bronze Age prior to 1200, maybe between 1200 and 1550. We did find a few potsherds from that period, and so we're hopeful as we keep going down in Jalul, we'll get some of that earlier occupation, that earlier history. We'll now look over into squares next to this wall and see what connects into them. That's what we've just uncovered this season. Okay. We're now in one of the squares just inside that wall that we saw just a moment ago. In fact, here's part of that wall coming out of the balk right here. This is probably the upper phase dating to the middle of the Iron II period, perhaps the 8th century BC. And we can see that there are paving stones here. It's a little dirty now, the wind's been blowing today, but there are stones here that come right up to the bottom of this phase. So we assume that this is a contemporary large building. Very typical in the Iron II period were what we call pillared buildings. Sometimes they were designed or separated into 4 rooms. We call them 4-room houses. Sometimes they'd have only 3 rooms. Sometimes they may be part of a house or some other type of a structure. Scholars speculate as to whether pillared buildings included stables, marketplaces, and other types of buildings. We're not sure what type of building this is, but we clearly have pillars. There's one right here standing straight up. It would probably have another rock on top of it, or perhaps a wooden block, and it would support roof beams. So this would actually be the support of a roof at a higher level. It's speculated that the place between these standing stones or these pillars was maybe an open kind of a court area. Maybe if it was a house, fires would be built here and the smoke could go out without bothering anybody. The side rooms, though, this side room kept going through the balk here. We'll see the other half of this room in just a few moments. But these side rooms, where the pavement was, they probably were covered with a roof, and this may be where people either slept, or they kept their animals, or they stored things to keep them out of the rain and out of the sunshine. This room's kind of interesting because we've got a pillar here. Large stone has fallen over onto the floor here, perhaps. We have another pillar right here, another one here that's been broken and moved from somewhere, and then of course this one here. 3 of these are fallen over, and they seem to be heading off in this northerly direction. And we're wondering whether there was a big earthquake or something that knocked them all over. We don't know that for sure. Maybe it was just destruction. Maybe the building was burnt or something, and these just happened to collapse under weight. There was a lot of rubble here. Some of the rubble, though, was taken out. We had a few Bedouin graves that dug all the way down to our Iron Age floor and below. And, of course, that causes a little bit of a challenge for archaeologists because when they dig down into the dirt, they bring sherds from recent times, pottery sherds and other artifacts clear down to our Iron Age levels, and that creates a problem. We actually had a grave here. You can see the little hollow out in the dirt. We had a grave in this general vicinity, I believe, but there was another grave that went clear down here underneath the Iron Age floor. It was only dug 100 years ago, but they dug over 1.5 meters, almost 2 meters down into our Iron Age, and that causes contamination. It makes it difficult to date things. Fortunately, though, we were able to get good sherds on the sides of the square, and we're pretty confident that this building dates to the Iron II period. We're trying to get the other half of the building over here in this new square we just opened up. We're just starting to hit the paving stones there, but we still have a few days of digging to clean it up to see what the building's going to look like over on that side. We'll see the other side of the building over here, and we'll move over to that spot now. Okay, now we're in the square next to the pillared room. This is actually part of the pillared room. This is the exterior wall on the west side that's running right along here under my shadow, off towards the Gufas. This wall heads off in a northeasterly direction and actually seems to hook in. We're still studying that. We just dug this out a few minutes ago. Hooks into this bigger wall that we saw a little while ago. That may be a city wall. It was built in two phases, as we said, in the Iron II, the 8th century. The first part in the I should say the 9th century, early part of the Iron II. So apparently this is a major wall here, maybe a city wall or part of a larger complex. This is a interior wall or the edge of this pillar room coming off that big wall off in the south direction. You can still see the paving stones coming right up against it. They come right through the block. I'm stepping on them here. They come right up to the wall. There's another pavement about the same level that goes out from that wall. We dug down on either side to get some dates, but it continues into a bunch of fallen stones there that we haven't determined the function of yet. All of this seems to date from about the middle of the Iron II period, about the 8th century. We have to mention, though, we did find some Persian pottery and other things up on top in the rubble from later periods, but it's not the pottery on top that dates the building. It's what's in the foundation trench or underneath the wall or the floor that will give us a good date. We'll just look at a couple more squares quickly, then we'll head up to Field C and see what they're discovering up there. Okay, now we're up in Field C. This is a new field of 4 squares that we just opened this season. Penny Clifford and Dick Dorsett were both with the field supervisors, sharing the duties with Dave Merling. This particular square, Kent Birmingham and Julie Lepore brought it down very quickly, a little faster than the other squares, and in just a couple of days they hit a sort of ephemeral wall here, probably from the Persian period. We took it out. You don't see it, but it was running at about this level. After they took that out, underneath it, they hit this very large wall, not quite a meter thick. To test the depth of the wall, we did a probe, and we went clear down until we hit this floor here, and we discovered, particularly when we compared to what was going on in the square next door, that this was actually the inside of a very large room. This is the floor of the room down here where my shadow of my hand is waving back and forth. There were stones on top of it. It's full of rubble. The pottery would seem to suggest that it's an Iron II room again, so we're back in the same time periods as we saw in Fields B and Fields A. We're not exactly sure where. In the middle, under my feet where this rubble is, we're actually on top of a dirty, rocky rubble that's filling the inside of the room here. We're actually quite up above the floor here. We have been finding some Persian period pottery, time of Queen Esther, a little bit later than the Iron II, not the 7th or 6th centuries, but we're talking about the 5th, maybe even the 4th centuries. However, as we go down, it seems like there's less and less Persian pottery. Closest to the floor, we seem to find pretty much late Iron II pottery. So it may be that we have a building from the Iron II. What we hope to do in the last few days of the dig is put in some additional probes and try and get something either under the wall, under the floor, maybe in the other square, a foundation trench that will give us a good date for this very large building. Next season we'll have to come back, open up more of the building, dig out more of the rubble, and see if we can determine the building's function. We don't know what this building was used for. Was it a big house? Was it some kind of administrative complex or something else? We really can't say. The wall isn't necessarily any thicker than what a big house might be, so that may be what we have. We're just below the Acropolis of the city, though, and it's kind of a key and an interesting place within the city plan. Down in the bottom you can see what appears to be some kind of a standing stone or more likely a pillar. Until we take the block down we can't see exactly what it's doing, but maybe it was helping to support roof beams, just as we saw over in Field A. Other than that we can't say too much about it. It might be interesting just to look quickly in the square next door to see how this wall continues. You can see it going right through here, it disappears into the bog right here. but it'll continue over in the next square. So we'll jump over there next. Okay, what we see along here, in fact, you might even be able to pick it up in the picture. You have that wall in square C2 that Julie and Kent excavated. It comes right through the buck and continues under my feet. Goes down below. Now, the interesting thing we discovered here is that there's a wall that shoots off this direction. It appears to be some type of an interior wall. Again, on top of all these buildings are Iron II and Persian sherds, but they don't date the building. We have to get down to the floor and the foundation and underneath the floor to determine the actual age, and we're suspicious these are going to be Iron Age. We still have some phases of this wall here. Seems to have been maybe a later addition. We're still studying the connection to see if it's bonded or whether it's abutting up against it. Then we've got this larger wall down below my hand to my left here that continues off towards the south. Again, that seems to be a different phase. We're not sure which was built first yet. Our intuition would be that this is maybe a little bit later. It's abutting up against the wall that I'm standing on and continues on in that direction. Down in the pit where the folks are working now, Kent and Julie are down there in Mary Beth Square. There's a wall heading off towards the west that Kent is kneeling on. That may be part of this big wall here. Maybe some of the stones were robbed out. Maybe it's a lower wall, and we'll have to take out more dirt to find out what's going on. Our preliminary dating of this, again, seems to place all of this in the late Iron II, perhaps the middle Iron II. But until we finish excavation today, clean the pottery and read it, we're not going to be exactly sure. All told, though, all four of these squares in this area seem to be part of a big building complex from the Iron Age. Everything to my west seems to be the inside of the building. We're really just excavating the rubble outside of this building. It'll be very interesting as we continue the next 3.5 days of this season. We'll come back in the next season. We'll clear this building out and see exactly what it was. Hopefully we'll find some interesting things inside of it. Future seasons we'll open up the squares around and just see what type of a neighborhood we have here in the middle of Jalul. Last season I should say, 2 years ago, when we were trying to determine where to lay down our fields, one criteria we had was to stay away from the Acropolis, where the modern cemetery is up on the high part of the tell up here. That's the upper city of antiquity. And because of that cemetery being up there, we knew we had to stay way away from it so it would make people feel comfortable. So we decided we better try and locate a field on this side of the tell, on this eastern edge. And so as we were looking around wondering, trying to determine from the surface what might lie below, Dave Merling and Jim Fisher noticed that there's a kind of a gradual slope coming up from the north to the south at the side of the hill here. And they suggested maybe a gate complex would be located in this area. And that would give us monumental architecture to tie into and help us to start to get a stratigraphic picture of what's going on here at Jalul in terms of its occupational history. So we put in about 4 squares in this area. This is our field B, actually. And Dick Dorset was the square supervisor down here in this northernmost square. North is straight that direction, east is right behind you, west that way. And he went down about, you can see about 30 centimeters in that corner and started hitting rock right away. And that was the first rock of the season. He got quite excited and he kept clearing it. And he only had about 4 or 5 loci in that square, and wham, he came down his entire square. It's his first square here, nothing but stones on the bottom. And so we were, yeah, huge wall. We were quite impressed with that. But the fact that it was going downhill and where we thought a gate might be, we thought it must be a rampway. If you've ever been over to the West Bank and visited Tel Dan or Tel Beersheba or Lachish, you'll see a similar type of approach rampway to Iron Age gates. So we got quite excited. Denise's husband, Larry, was trying to make us feel nervous by suggesting maybe it was a Mamluk thing. He was just giving us a hard time. Mamluk basketball court or something, you know, with all these flat stones. We kept coming this way in these squares, and as you can see, some of the pavement was robbed out, so we went down below. We were able to excavate the soil right underneath this dirt down here, right immediately under this pavement. We had Iron Age pottery on top, but of course that doesn't necessarily date anything. It could be mixed from all sorts of periods and thrown in. A fill brought in from another part of the tell. What we needed to get was underneath. All of this was 8th century pottery. We couldn't find any sherds later than the middle of the 8th century. We found none of the blackware you find in Umayri, none of the offset bowls, no Persian ware, no Assyrian ware, nothing like that. Only things that are typical of the middle of the Iron Age. The whole mouth craters that you see a lot of, whole cooking pots with the slightly inverted rim and so forth. So we got lots of good Iron II stuff. We're guessing about the 8th century BC. So we had this nice road. As we kept coming down, we were quite surprised to hit this. And as you can see right here, it's a good meter and a little bit more than a meter actually underneath this pavement. So we had a second road going up the same direction. So we were more confident than ever that we had the location of the gate. We had two roads leading to it from two different periods. To date this road, we went down further in this square and in the square over on the other side. That was Jim Fisher's square. This was actually Jim Fisher's field last season. And we found underneath that a lot of iron 1 pottery underneath this pavement right here. These are these collar rim jars that you've been finding at Umayri and the carinated bowls. We even found some late Bronze Age pottery. But after digging for about 5 weeks, we found 4 early iron 2 sherds underneath this pavement. So the best we can figure is this must have been built close to the end of the iron 1 period, maybe 10th, 9th century, but those 4 sherds were there, they were in a seal locus, and there's no way we can date them to the iron 1. It has to be early iron 2. So we think we have 2 roads from the middle of the iron 2 and early iron 2 heading up to the gateway. This season's objective obviously was to try and find the gate. We made a new grid. That's why our squares look a little strange. We put them onto Gary Christofferson's new grid so that all the squares in the entire tell will tie in together. So the squares were a little bit off alignment. And as luck would have it, our new alignment placed the gate, which we eventually found, and we'll show you in a minute, entirely in the box. If we would have dug on the old grid, we would have found it. But we put on a new grid, so everything was hidden from us. And now we'll look over to the other side for a second. Anticipated the road would come up this direction. You can see the paving stones where Howard's standing. There was a balk coming down there, a double balk actually, of about a couple meters wide. So we thought, no problem, the road just goes up here, hangs right, goes into the city. So we plunked in these squares right here to find the city gate. Everywhere we went down, we didn't find anything. Zilch. We found all the strata. Just above that lower pavement is a gray layer you can see in the box around you down there. We hit the gray here, but there was no architecture. Except for where these folks are sitting there. We found that one wall. We thought, great, this must be the edge of the gate. We put a probe in this square, nothing, gone. And we were really perplexed. We put a probe down here, nothing. We dug along here, we hit this surface right here. Now remember, this was all under a balk until just a couple of days ago. So finally we said, we got to take out the balks. We took out a massive balk coming this way, our double balk, and we took out the balks this way. And Jim found, well, those stones over there, we thought this was the pavement initially that was continuing here. So we thought, great, there's no gate at all. We didn't know what this thing was. It didn't seem to fit any pattern of a gate. But as he kept excavating, eventually this came up. It's a U-shaped structure, part of the chamber. These are the 2 piers right here. And then suddenly we realized this wasn't pavement at all. This was the other pier on the east side. It hooks into the wall here. We saw this. There's a pit right here. And the northeast pier was swabbed out. It's missing, but we have 3 of the piers. This is not a massive gate like we were expecting. This is apparently the outer gate chamber that we have. But it ties to the early iron 2. All the pottery was consistent all the way through. Underneath this was a gravelly area actually. They've taken that out, but underneath it, where they kind of dug along and checked, they found iron 1 collar rim jars again, and a few iron 2 sherds. So it's all stratigraphically fitting together very nice. So we do have, finally here in Transjordan, our nice outer gatehouse for a 9th century Iron Age gate. We think there might still be something under Layla and in the squares over there, and we're not sure we've gone down far enough. So if Layla wants to get a shovel and start digging, next season we'll see if we can find the inner gatehouse. It would have been over there. There's a great big stone under some rubble that we have buried right now. It may have turned a little bit further in, and it may be off that direction, the main gatehouse. So next season we'll look for it.
Here's here. What is this?
Well, actually, we thought that was a pavement, but what I should say is we discovered, as we clean this section out here, the pavement actually, when you trace the grade level, comes right up to here. These pebbles underneath the road actually came here, so you have to draw a line from this stone down to here. The road actually went up, it either was robbed out, the paving stones, or else they only had gravel inside the gatehouse proper.
We think it's still pavement.
So this is actually probably the threshold going into the main gatehouse. So this is sort of the outer gatehouse, and this probably went in and turned a corner. There's probably a tower out there, another 10 meters or so, and we just haven't hit it yet. So we think this is probably the threshold to the gatehouse. This is a pier right here. This would go into the inner gate. This would be the outer gate right here. We're still trying to put this piece together, but that's our present hypothesis. But the piers, I think, are pretty indicative. They may have had benches inside, you know, where the judges would sit and so forth, but the benches are gone in this case.
What about this big stone here?
We think that's probably part of one of the 2 gatehouses, but we're not sure it's in cedar. We're going to have to dig more to find out what that one stone does. We've been intrigued by it too. So a lot's missing from here, though. There's certainly a lot robbed out. Okay?
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's fun.
Great.
This is Field C. Our second season, we thought we'd go ahead and risk getting in a little closer to the necropolis and exploring the interior of the tell, finding out what's going on in the inside. We didn't want to be accused of being interested only in masculine archaeology like fortifications and gateways. So we came in to look at some of the buildings on the inside of the tell, and there's this natural plateau up here. It was flat, there didn't seem to be a lot of rock on the surface, so we thought it would be a great place to put some squares down, see what was going on in the interior of the tell. Our first meter, of course, was just the usual fill. It was a little bit boring. The first half people did that. The second half people got down all the way and to the floor. What we discovered, initially, it's gone now, but right in here, this is where we started finding a lot of Persian pottery in this square here. A lot of the craters and basins like you have at Umayri from the late periods and so on. And I want to say, don't walk in the balk right there where Lloyd is, because that's just collapsed under his feet. Yeah, there's a big hole there, and it could give way any second, so probably best stay off that one. This building was just full of rock rubble, almost all the way down. Persian period on the top. As we kept going down through the rubble, it seemed to have more and more late iron II stuff, which we had not seen before. Remember at the meeting last night I said that we seemed to only have 8th and 9th and 10th century previous season, but here we had all the late stuff. Persian and 6th century, 7th century, and so forth. We finally got to the floor. We had this very nice wall. We took out the Persian wall. There was sort of an ephemeral, not well-constructed wall right along the line of this wall that you can still see. We took that out. Underneath it we found an earlier wall, and we did a probe here, just didn't have enough time this season, and went all the way to the floor. There's a pillar down here that when you come around you can see. It seems to be that this is an early, or an iron II wall. We didn't get good pottery underneath it though, we just had pottery on the surface of the floor, which isn't the best dating material. Mary Beth was excavating here. This was Kent and Julie's square over here, and as she was coming on, she came down on the same wall. We saw it was in the same line that turned a corner. We are again getting Persian period on the surface and some late iron II mixed in. And as she came down a little bit further, suddenly she hit another wall. And as you can see, it's much wider and it slightly heads off at a more eastern angle. And you can see that this wall I'm standing on actually was built such that it comes across and is built on top of this. If you're standing in that buck, this is where the thing gets a little bit complicated. We have a lot more dirt stratigraphy here than you have at Umayri, so you almost have to see any building from about 4 angles to understand what's going on. There's a beautiful trench that comes in this block right here down to the bottom of this wall. Locus 21, those of you that can see it over here. The pottery in the bottom of this trench is late iron II Persian. So that would suggest that this wall was in use during the late iron II Persian period up here. What I suspect happened, I'm still sorting this out, there's evidence that the building itself was built in the iron II, but that they rechecked the trench and the upper part was rebuilt in the Persian period. They dug down to the bottom to check the foundation, and they went ahead and reconstructed the top portion of it after making sure the foundation was good. So we think this is late iron II Persian period in 2 phases. This wall here is rather interesting. It's been a trick today. We're down to a floor on this side. And on this side of this trench that you can see going this way, everything from about this part of the square over, it was collapsed mud brick. You can even see a mud brick in the wall at Locus 24. And it was in here, you saw our nice whole lamps. We had craters. Larry was suggesting they might even go as early as late Bronze Age. I was calling them Iron 1. We've got other Iron 1 pottery on both sides and both squares. And the thing is, it was that way all the way down to the floor. It sealed the floor, which would suggest that this part of the building was out of use while this was being used. There's sort of a hill going up here. It was all covered with Iron 1 pottery. So it's possible that this is an Iron 1 wall here. And down below we have another wall, which could be Iron 1 or even late Bronze Age. We dug a trench along it, could not find a single datable sherd, so we don't know what we've got. But we do seem to have a couple of early periods. The same thing on the other side. We've got a late Iron II Persian period use wall there. But the floor that you see in that square over there was sealed by Iron 1 stuff with nothing later at all, and we're suspicious that the original portion of the building going this way was used in Iron 1, destroyed, buried. In Iron 2, they had this building next to it. The land, the key thing to keep in mind is that the topography on the tell changed dramatically. There was a hill here in antiquity, and this was kind of built in a depression then. Now it looks flat. But the surface today has no relevance to what the surface might have looked like when people were building buildings here in the past, and that's what makes stratigraphy so challenging. You can have buildings at different levels that are contemporaneous, buildings at the same level that are from 2 different periods, and it keeps you on your toes to try and sort that out. Okay, you have probably similar challenges at Umayri where things are shifting around. So basically we've got Persian period, late Iron II, and apparently some Iron 1 stuff. It'll take future seasons to verify that though. Any other questions? This building here just basically filled in with a lot of late Iron II Persian junk, all those rocks, after the building went out of use. And again, we went clear down to the floor in that building. Next season, we'll be able to open up this whole building over here. Its function, sort of, we have no idea. We've got the usual mixture of whole mouth craters, lots of bowls, not too many cooking pots, just a few storage jars. Seems to be more of the craters and bowls. I'm trying to think what the objects were in this field. It seems like most of the objects came from most of our figurines. We did find the little incense altar was found in Suzanne Square, which is over there in that corner. And then the whole pots were found by John over in this square over here. And then we had a roof roller found in the rubble over here. And this just had some interesting pottery, but that was about it if I remember. Last season we started this trench down this direction to look for the city wall. And we hit the wall, we hit a wall here. I don't think this is a city wall, but we hit this wall and we thought it was quite a thick one. I think we mentioned already in the show, the slideshow last night, and some of you were here before, that we construct two phases for this wall. And if you're way over there, you can actually see the foundation trench for the upper phase right here. It comes halfway down the wall. Down here is the lower phase. The lower phase is built of flat stones. The upper phase is built of bigger stones here. Underneath this lower phase, we found Iron I pottery again. The carinated bowls and the cauldron jars and the Iron I flanged cooking pots. And up here higher, we found mid-Iron II stuff. We did find a few Iron II sherds very early, so we date the lower phase just like we do over at the gateway. 9th, 10th century for the lower wall, and about the 8th century for this upper wall right here. This season we decided to go inside and see if we could learn more about what this wall did. We were quite surprised because it was not one wall at all. We actually discovered there's two walls, and you can see there's a line going right down the middle of this wall, right along here. That puzzled us for a while, and it's still a little bit perplexing. Apparently they built up against this wall. What surprised us, though, we saw all these rooms starting to emerge. I'll speak more about that in a moment, but these rooms, pavements over there, were dating very late. We're getting Persian period pottery again, late Iron II. Everything out here was Iron I and early Iron II. So we wondered what in the world was going on. We've been able to determine that there's two walls here. This wall right here actually dates to late Iron II and Persian. It was used twice right along here. It was built up against the earlier wall. And I think we figured out the reason today why. We'll explain in just a second. This pavement that I'm standing on is Persian. Underneath it we found some Persian late Iron II sherds, so we don't have any doubt about it. It's nice steel locust. These stones were probably laid down just as a support for this upper pavement here. Down below, you can see stratigraphically we've got a lower pavement again. This is not a natural bridge that was robbed out. We just left this for a section test. Underneath this, we dug down below to the base of this wall. The wall and this pavement date to the late Iron II. So you've got Persian, late Iron II. We found Assyrian bowls, nice late Iron II pottery. This wall and this pavement also date to the late Iron II. This pavement I'm standing on here. Over in the square behind you, that was Ruzhitsa Gregor. She found a continuation of this pavement, but more than that, she found a number of pillars. And they're in a row, but they've fallen over. I suspect there's been some earthquake action because they seem to have fallen the same direction. This is another example of what's emerging in Transjordan of the pillared house. Whether it's four-roomed or not, we can't say because we haven't dug the whole thing out. But there is a dirt courtyard in the center between the pillars. On the far east side, you'll see it's paved, and on the west side, it's paved. And this is, by the way, the same situation has existed at the famous Megiddo Stables that one of our colleagues, I don't know if she's here today, she's interested in horses, and she's been interested in the so-called Megiddo Stables. Big debate whether those are used for horses or for people. I think Larry Hurd suggested they were marketplaces, which is an idea I rather like, at least in some settings. So we see some pillars coming up, but they're out of alignment, so the room apparently turns and makes an interesting corner. So we again have late Iron II Persian, and underneath that we have late Iron II in all four squares. What we have is part of a big building. Next season we'll just have to keep opening out, go down and open up the building. Over here was the most complex thing. I don't know how much you would like hassles with stratigraphy, but we had this wall, double wall here, and what we really had was 9th century and 8th century on top, 7th century down below, and Persian on top. Why would they build four phases like this in this one wall? What we discovered just today, we took out part of this block. There was a hill here in antiquity. That hill itself was made of Iron I pottery. And when the people were building their wall along here, they turned a corner and it suddenly went downhill. Somebody had dug a hole there, so they followed their wall line down. You'll see that the wall lines don't match, but they date to the same period. What I think happened was, after a period of time, this outer wall was pulling away from this inner wall. And apparently it turns a corner and keeps going that direction. As it pulled away, people later on, to kind of plug that hole, they built this wall and built their house up against it, and kind of built a wall here to close the gap right here. You can even see there's a little bit of a gap here. If you look down below, the whole wall is sagging this direction. So they didn't make a good foundation. It's not built on rock. When you build your house upon the sand, it tends to fall apart. So we think that's why there's all this complex wall stratigraphy here. Our earliest structure over here, this wall here seems to be 9th, 10th century right here with my shadow. And we have a nice house that's emerging here that dates to the same period with a nice beaten earth floor. The probe underneath again has good collar rim jars, carronade bolts from the Iron 1, and maybe a few Iron 2 shirts. So this is probably our earliest house so far on the site at Jalul. Anyway, so that's our quick picture from 1 year, give you an idea. Next year we hope to open up in all areas and then eventually go down. In all of these squares in the fills, we also found a little bit of late Bronze Age pottery and some Middle Bronze Age pottery. Some very beautiful, that that kind of eggshell texture of white slip. That's very nice. So we know that there's good late Bronze and Middle Bronze stuff below, but the architecture's still down there waiting for us. All the architecture we're bumping into is still in the Iron Age. It was in this field, by the way, we got our male figurine, the bearded man with a crown. We got our little lion, both with the front and hind quarters, a nice, beautiful little piece. We also got the female figurine with the hands under the breast in the classic style of the Iron 2 period. And a number of the other artifacts came out of here as well. Sabal's seal came from Field B. I forgot to mention they had a nice little ibex on the end of a stamp seal. Other than that's probably our most spectacular find. We found some javelin heads and catapult balls and a few other things, arrowheads, but that's pretty much it. Similar things to what you're finding at Umayri, not quite as many yet. Okay, any questions?
All right, well, the moat was dug in MB, we think, because the soil layer above it was all MB and EB pottery, okay, up to those large stones, so about 75 centimeters of it. The soil description also matches the MB rampart
Up
at the
above.
top.
Okay.
Okay. Our thesis is now, do you see the crack in bedrock up there?
A crack
Just
in
on that corner.
bedrock.
Yep, bedrock is flat at the top.
Yeah, okay.
And then it breaks off.
Yeah,
That is
okay,
a
yeah.
very fresh break.
Okay.
All right? That was the result, most likely, of an earthquake, which broke the shelf off. Boom. Fell down. They filled in and reconstructed the rampart in the Middle Bronze Age, we think,
Interesting.
now. All right? And we'll see that very graphically up there. I suspect that after the earthquake, this stuff eroded into the moat, and then maybe they put in those two huge stones to retain a reconstructed rampart. All right?
You see any phasing in the pottery at all? No.
No,
Okay.
no. I mean, this is
Yeah, very close together.
very close
Yeah.
together.
Okay.
Yeah. Then that apparently was left to go for a while the site was unoccupied. Then in Iron 1, they built the rampart on top of what was preserved of the MB, built this retaining wall, only down apparently to the level where it is right now.
Does it quite hit the MB rampart there, or is it above it?
No,
It's
that's the
above it.
problem. Where I
Interesting.
made this section, I
Yeah.
dug down into it a little bit,
Yeah.
and I pulled out an Iron 1 cooking pot
Okay.
out of that thing.
Okay.
And so what I suspect is that the earliest settlement, okay, we had a late bronze settlement that was inside the bowl of the MB rampart, okay, that didn't do any fortifications. Then we have an Iron 1 settlement, which also does not seem to have done very much, or if they did anything, it was minimal. Another theory is that these large stones down at the bottom could be that earliest settlement's retaining wall. Then something happened.
Now, when you said earliest settlement, you're talking about Iron 1?
The earlier Iron 1
right,
settlement.
Right.
And then something happened. We were positing yesterday that the earthquake was iron 1. I wish it could be that way, but I don't think it can. And so we were suggesting that this is a rebuild. The retaining wall, the main retaining wall, is a rebuild in iron 1. That would explain why we have iron 1 pottery underneath.
Yeah. And they just moved, they realigned it in a little.
Yeah. What we need to do probably next season is to dig down there behind these other 2 stones and to see if that really is consistently iron 1.
To support the
Iron 1 rampart.
Okay, so it's down here to hold it in place.
It seems strange to me that that's not anchored on something solid, though. That's
Which?
The upper one there.
Yeah. Well, you'll see how they anchored it to hold it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not on bedrock, but there was a real gray surface kind of thing. It's just plain as day where I made the little shelf going in. You see that? Underneath the rocks. It was clear as
Really
could be.
hard-packed stuff.
I didn't need a large space to trace it. Just zip. It came up like clockwork. But you also notice a couple phases
You're
in
right.
that wall.
The lower 2 courses are sticking out.
Or but also the larger stones in the bottom.
Okay.
And then smaller stones at the
On
top.
the top.
What that means, I'm not quite so sure. It may mean a couple of different pavings, or could be a late iron 2 addition to that.
It seems
As
you
I
have
suspect.
the 2 very large courses. Then you've got some of the same kinds of stones that are up on end. Then you've got a bunch of smaller
Same stones like down here.
Right. Right.
Late iron 2.
We have our late iron 2 rebuild. Yeah. But the iron 1 people did not go down below. You know, they weren't very deep in this moat either. I was thinking before, when we found the bottom of the iron 1 retaining wall, that's all the farther they went, and the moat actually was only excavated in their time down to that level, and that would correspond with this bedrock shelf down here. Problem is, now we've got the iron 1 below that, but it still could have been very shallow in use with that retaining wall. In other words, not very deep. Then later on, see that corresponding to the 2 big stones down below is that second shelf down there.
Down here, okay.
So we have the steps kind of that seem to correspond to these use patterns. Apparently, we have to sort those out. But yeah, it's all iron 2 fill that goes down into this thing, almost to the bottom, not quite to
And
the
then you
bottom.
had some. Did you have anything separating the MB and the iron 2 at all?
Nope,
Any kind?
nope,
Okay,
just
one.
boom.
So
Okay.
you're assuming that the retaining wall, except for maybe the top portion, which might have been added then, and the
Yeah.
rampart were used all the way through
It's
iron
iron
2.
1. No,
But
it's-
used into iron 2.
Right, yeah. Well, actually,
That's
you'll
why it's
see,
filled up with iron 2
it was
stuff.
used, but that wasn't visible in late iron 2, as we shall see.
The top part maybe, but the bottom part not, or you
Maybe,
say none of
that's
it?
right.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see. It goes pretty high. Let's go up a little farther.
It's a lot of work.
During the late iron 2 period, because it was sloping and so easy therefore to climb, over there you see going right up a thin layer of stones that go up to this height right there. Okay, that was the facing of the late iron 2 outer retaining wall. And I'm talking about 2 late iron 2 retaining walls now. This an inner one to really hold the weight of the rampart. This an outer one to make the face straighter and more difficult to climb. And then they just filled it with these sharply tipping layers until you get to the bottom where it's horizontal that had the iron 1 debris in it at the bottom. So the late iron 2 probably built this to hold the rampart, but then made a straighter face. And last season we took a picture from over there, and we still had most of that face in the wall, but that goes way up. Made just out of little stones. You know, this isn't any big thing. So we have MB, we have bedrock, MB, rampart. Just how it was held back, we aren't quite sure. It's probably somewhere under here, but that's what they're digging for now. The iron 1 rampart, and then the late iron 2 sort of rebuild, all using this moat system. Now we know that there was another earthquake here as well. We have 2 earthquake indicators. We have this crack up here, okay, and then down there, you see the bedrock that we were standing on, okay.
Yep.
On the second little bedrock terrace beneath was a shack, walls of a shack. And we found 2 complete pots, a basin, a bowl, but they were underneath the bedrock shelf.
Overhang, yeah.
Yeah. In other words, that was originally higher, and you can see where it fell from.
Mm-hmm.
So put it up a meter.
Yeah.
Put it up a meter.
There's a fault, there's a crack right there, yeah.
Put it up a meter,
Yeah.
and it fell down on that shack. So that was a post late iron too. In fact, it probably put out of use that little thing, or they would have retrieved their pots.
Yeah.
But it was probably an early Persian earthquake that collapsed that. We're beginning to be able to date these things pretty well. Like this earthquake, we're going to be able to date to about 1600. That one to about 500.
Interesting, because we are seeing a little bit of evidence for possible earthquake at Jalul. The question is whether that's Persian or, we had the pillared building. Kind of wonder if it isn't a little earlier in the late iron, but so I don't know.
Well, this collapsed on top of those late iron to early Persian
stuff,
pots. So this was being used sort of as a dwelling.
Yeah.
Well, let's
That's
go.
interesting. Yeah.
You can even see over here that there's this large crack in the bedrock. When we excavated this crack was without any soil in it, and what we're assuming is that after the rampart was built, an earthquake happened, cracked the bedrock, and it was so well sealed with the rampart that nothing was able to fall through. We're suggesting that probably happened at the time that a much larger crack developed in the bedrock here. Here's the shelf of bedrock that I'm standing on the other side of this rampart part, and then you can see the shelf where it has broken off and it's now lower, it's fallen down the hill. And the interesting thing is that you've got this yellow clay and white stone type of construction, and it goes right down into that bedrock opening. That's why we think that when the bedrock cracked, it left a huge opening here that they filled in later, and it was probably open somewhere near the beginning of the construction of our Iron 1 rampart, somewhere in the 13th century, late 13th century. They left some soil here, just filled in this right here. And in this soil was early bronze pottery. So there was an early bronze settlement here. They scraped it off all the way down to bedrock, but didn't clear out the part right here. And in the process, built their rampart over the top. In fact, you can't see it right behind you, but there's a cup hole, which is typical, drilled into bedrock that the early bronze settlers used a lot. So this was early bronze at one point without a wall. Then Middle Bronze, people came along, maybe 1600, and built this huge rampart. That fell into disuse, and then after an earthquake, which we saw evidence of there and here, then Iron 1, probably in the 13th century, built their wall right on top of this rampart.
You see, I was expecting a pyramidal kind of support structure on that wall for this business. There is not. That's just a facing. But look what they did to support it. There's a triangular lens of boulders. And
actually, that probably is structurally, from an engineering point, better.
Exactly. That absorbs all the weight and really, I think, does it well.
Yeah.
So, but that's Iron 1. And that's on either side of the Iron 1. Now they also laid some soil underneath, because the top of the MB rampart seems to be that next lowest layer of rubble, or the bottom of the Iron 1 one seems to be that. In other words, what they're coming down to right there seems to be the MB rampart. Is that right, Bob?
We hope.
Now,
That's an opinion based on emotional findings at this point.
Oh, you're that far above it.
yeah, we just left it there.
I see.
See, what happens is bedrock breaks off and gets real steep, but we're going to see why we think that's an MB earthquake. I wish it were Iron 1. I wish it could be the reason for the rebuild, the massive rebuild of our town, which took place
But your pottery in here is all MB that they're digging through right now?
No, that's all iron one.
It is
There's-
all iron one.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can see the pieces where
Yeah.
they're dislodged. It's
Yeah.
like a puzzle piece.
So that's the rock right there.
That's the rock.
Okay.
It was level and
Yeah.
just broke off. And
Yeah.
by the way, the level of this bedrock and that bedrock out there is 50 centimeters difference.
Really? Interesting.
That's 50
That made a
centimeters
dramatic
lower.
change in the slope, didn't it, when
Yeah.
the earthquake came?
So this was essentially just a bedrock ridge going out here originally when people came. Wasn't a hill. So they felt they had to fortify it desperately. So the digging of the moat and the presence of the rampart.
Digging of the moat through bedrock.
Yeah. Oh
We've
yeah.
only got 20 centimeters to go here, right?
And so that was bedrock was level here. You know, essentially level all the way across. We think, and especially if you reconstruct that fallen slab
Now,
there.
is
you
this
know.
the edge of the moat then, or is it further down?
Could be. That
Yeah.
looks like another fresh break,
Yeah.
like this one here.
Yeah.
So I
So maybe in
suspect there's another
stages,
piece.
stair steps down to the actual cut.
Yeah. Now you see the gray debris of the MB rampart up there, and you see how boom it
Yeah.
goes down right to that cut, and it's been filled. See what
Well,
happened?
what's up here though then, Larry?
Hang on.
Okay.
What happened when the earthquake occurred? You can see broke off, and you can see where
Yeah.
it broke off there, and you can see where it broke off over there.
Yeah,
The gray
okay.
continues, but it doesn't continue very high. It just kind of goes around and then down. And I suspect that when the earthquake happened, this is where erosion occurred, down this way, because all of a sudden things are tilted more. Relatively rapid erosion occurred. So they filled it in with this huar mixture, okay, which would be mixed with water, would be very firm and strong. And then that continues over the gray over here. And then they recapped it with this
Okay.
white stuff.
Okay.
And it made a little dip because maybe it was settling where they filled it, made a little dip, and then went up to the old stuff. The bottom of the nari there is actually a thin plaster layer that is the top of the MB rampart. So, can we date this? The discussion has been, is it Iron 1 or is it MB? Because obviously it happened while people were living here and concerned with the fortification system. Because the breaks are fresh, it's filled in right away and reused. It must be an MB thing, because the Iron 1 layer seems to go up and over it undisturbed.
So what's coming out below these two big stones here, down to where your current rock is? What's coming out of that then? All MB? I mean, MB's the latest.
Well, as they were, remember, Dave, in your square, it was very easy to tell the two apart, the MB rampart from the MB1, because of the rubble. Well, you had that rubble over there too, right?
Yeah, I
You
did.
excavate that rubble, boom, it was smooth, it was nice, everything. Here it's not that way. I think the repair to the rampart was done. You can see the gray of the original. Then it's brown. I think that's the
right,
repair. And the repair has made it very difficult for us to tell the two apart. And we've been keep getting a mixture of MB and Iron 1 pottery. So they've been through here digging in both. Now they think that it's that rubble layer that is the bottom of the Iron 1 rampart now. And then it comes up through here and probably steeply up, following that light lens, okay? And up and settled in the pit fill, and especially there was a stabilizing row of stones there, which weighted it down furthermore. So it's it does a little flat thing and then goes up the rest of the way. You can also see that same line in this block here. But because this soil is so easy to make a surface out of, that's what they've done. Like what these people were doing. And messing with trade routes would be an
can
excellent
do that.
excuse.
And these are right on a couple of main arteries.
Right.
Messed with the people messing with the trade routes.
Well,
That's what I-
all sorts of things, you know. I think because the Midianites which seemed to be the chief traders, and at this very time had a big, prosperous center down in the northwest Hejaz and running, especially across the Negev. What's to hinder the Damascus route up along the King's Highway this way? See?
Right.
And here you have a group of people, and based on Cross's article, I'd suggest maybe it's Reuben, settle down here, build a big prosperous thing like this. How do they get prosperous? By stopping those caravans and saying, "Hey, give us a share of the
They want a piece of the
proceeds."
action.
Exactly.
And same thing, you wonder if the same thing's not going to occur at Jawa if she gets down to those levels. I mean, these two sites each guard.
She's pulled out sherds that look very much like ones from here. You have too. And I suspect Jalul, Jawa, Umayri, Hasban are all part of a group of people, an ethnos,
Yeah.
okay, an ethnic entity that they see themselves anyway.
The way he's being careful and phrasing all this.
Not a state. In no ways
Okay,
would I
okay.
claim it to be a state.
You gotta press that button.
It's, but they're
It would be
doing
a very
this.
strong confederation, though, very highly
Exactly,
organized and high
exactly.
level of cooperation.
And I
yeah.
think the biblical remembrances of Reuben make a very strong case that this could be that. There's no other literary evidence to suggest another group, I don't think. It could be Ammonites, but that it was a tribe that would later call itself Israel makes sense because they're knocked out here, knocked out completely. And maybe then they go to the west or something and then formally join Israel, see, and then become a tribe in it. But I don't think necessarily at that time it had to be strictly speaking that way, because the tribal confederation
Although that
was
can
very
be
fluid
treated,
and
yeah, that can be treated
went
as a
up and
separate
down
question,
and-
though. I mean, your
Exactly.
basic hypothesis of a group of people, whether it be Reuben, and that's
Yeah.
a possibility, whether it be someone
or
else
Ammon or Midian
disrupting
or,
trade routes makes a lot of sense to me coming up from
Yeah.
the south.
Yeah. Okay, from right here, you can see where the administrative center begins.
Okay.
With this wall that goes all the way through. Here's building B. This is our building C over here, the domestic complex,
Yeah,
okay?
Okay.
Building B is this 4-room house. You can see the back wall, which the back room, okay, going like that. And the wall at the end isn't very good, but it must have been battered against the Iron One stuff. They dug basements here, huge basements, and then founded these buildings. These smaller basements. What we're looking at now are the basement rooms. Over here, there's actually a stairway that goes down into one of the rooms. Okay, there's one long room here, one long room there, and a subdivided long room over there. This wall right here is probably the end wall, and these two walls going through here are later Persian
They cut
walls
into it.
of later things that don't go very deep.
They cut-
That's their founding level right there.
I see.
And these things were founded down into the Iron One destruction that we have over there. Rubble, bricks, ash, same kind of thing over here. So this is building B, our 4-roomer, okay? And it's so large that it's not a domestic thing. Here's where we found our 2 Shiva seals, right in this area. Our El Amat seal was also in this area. The Baalis seal, of course, was over there. The one we found this season was over there. So this is where a lot of these inscribed seals of officials and so on seem to have come from. Difficult to see. That goes right through here. That's the end wall of B. That begins A, which had larger walls, one up to 1.70 meters in width over there. And that, yeah, with the room that had some pottery in it and so on. But that way, as we go south, the walls get bigger and better. Look at these over here. So this is 1.5 meters. I mean, those are some 1.5 meters too, but this is much better made than those out there. This won't fall apart in the interseason. This is going to stay here. Over here we have our wall that's almost 2 meters wide, right here, which is probably the edge now of this system. They seem to have staggered a little bit, but it seems to be the outer edge of this building compound here, building D or whatever we're going to call it. It's been under this rubble. There was a terrace wall here, and the farmer threw the field stones, everything out, and that's why all those potsherds, including potsherds and
All
stuff.
stacked up there. So that's all
Yeah.
recent from his.
Yeah, Middle Ages or so.
This is not your entryway, huh?
No, we go around a little farther. But anyway, that's the story here. But we're really getting honking stuff.
Yeah.
All these stones have fallen from the upper walls. Okay.
This is
Below
big,
them, you see a face of a wall.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a wide wall. We don't have the north face yet. That's the latest Iron One phase. That's the phase that goes with our destroyed phase.
Your level, just for fun, compare here with what's over there. I mean, do you kind of see the continuation of a slope?
Yeah, I don't remember that. I think it was, I think John Lawler took it, but I don't remember that. But down under that, you see what it's founded on?
Yeah, there's two huge, at least two huge.
You know what it looks like? It looks like the Temple Mount excavations in Jerusalem, with all those huge stones that fell down on the street. These are big stones. They go along with the Iron One wall with the big stones over in this square.
Okay, this face, those smaller stones is running across those big ones.
Right, but
and
the big
ones are falling.
Are the Iron One, the first Iron One phase.
Okay.
And that then would be the earthquake destruction, see?
Okay.
If we put the earthquake in Iron One over there. The earthquake that broke that bedrock. This would be the earthquake destruction. Then they rebuilt with a cobble wall going up, cobble floor going up to this big wall too.
You're gonna have to bring in a crane or something.
Yeah, no, my object is to preserve this late Iron 2 stuff as well, but to go that way. That's why we're removing all these rocks.
Try and pick up the Iron One.
Because there's an important building in Iron 1 under here. Yeah.
That's a tough one. You know, I still wonder what we were talking about, when was it, last night, about ongoing preservation of walls. You know, I don't care, there may be a debate about cement, but you know, that would save.
Nothing better than...
I agree with you. There would be it would save all this, and you think about the time and cost, I think you come out ahead.
It was all that high originally, you know, and it's just gone.
I'm worried about
What you have to think about here are basically three, I don't know if phases is the right word, but what we're going to do on this right part here is go all the way down to bedrock, the whole way up, except we're going to leave that retaining wall. I'll tell you about that in a minute. Then you can see how it's separated in another third up on the rampart. That is one level, the middle bronze rampart from about 1600 or so. And then the next one is the Iron One rampart that connects with the casemate wall and the kind of settlement that we're working with up on top. Down here, what we've assumed, what we're suggesting is that this moat was dug out in the Middle Bronze period to match the rampart in the middle, and was done so because the bedrock we're standing on, which has collapsed due to an earthquake, is not much lower than the bedrock right behind Bob up there. It's only about a meter or so lower, and what we're assuming is that this whole saddle that joins us with this ridge to our west was basically the same level along here, and that what you see of the tell is almost entirely built up of occupational debris above that. This was simply the end of a ridge that came out here, and in order to protect that, to protect the settlement there from access from the west, this moat was excavated, as you can see, quite deeply and quite nicely. Really, very level at the bottom. And then the Bronze Age rampart came down to that. Now the problem is that the Bronze Age rampart has suffered a good deal of deterioration because of a couple things. One, of course, is the natural erosion, but also because of an earthquake or two. So, and we'll point that out when we walk up along the side there. So we don't know what happened underneath this later revetment wall that's holding the later rampart in place. So, from the Middle Bronze, a rampart, the moat, and then this was simply left rough this way so that didn't necessarily prevent access into the moat, but would have made it hard going up the rampart out the other side. Then what you see of the wall here is Iron Age. And now if you think, we're going to move a few hundred years, if you think about the moat partially filled in, probably about a meter filled in during the early Iron Age, Larry is suggesting somewhere at the end of the 13th century, 1225, 1230, something like that, that this was constructed. The ramp, you use the moat to the top of that wall. This would have held the rampart in place and also provided a disincentive for people to climb up that way, because it's fairly steep. We don't know exactly what to make of these two stones here, except that it seems to be a part of the Iron One construction to keep the rampart in place and to prevent people from coming up from the moat. And then if you think about this, going up the rampart, and that rampart went up and kind of leveled out before it hit the wall. And those of you standing on this side can see where we've now excavated over to the left of the trench here. You can see that white Nari stuff. That's the top of the Iron One rampart that goes right up to the wall. So it's fairly high on the wall. That means that the wall, of course, would have been much higher. When we walk up along the side here, we'll take a look again at both the Iron One and the Middle Bronze ramparts before we enter the city. The best way to do this, really, is to have the whole group go down into the moat and think about what it means to go up. But it's fairly hard now. We don't have our ladders here. And the second,
your Nerf balls.
Yes, we don't have our Nerf balls. And the second best is to walk up that Iron One rampart. But since they've just swept it, it's very nice, and we probably won't do that either. We'll get kind of a feel for it as we walk up along that path. Sid, nice to meet you, Sid.
I was up
Yeah.
top, with Jalul, but I was
Oh, thanks. Now, for this part of it, I'm going to start with the later, with the Iron One, which again you can see the top of which rampart you can see now going into the wall. This is the Iron One rampart, and then it kind of mounds up and levels out a bit. And this, of course, goes with that wall. You'll notice in the bulk over there that rubble, they used rubble to fill in here before, or right at the base here, and where they built the revetment wall. And then there was this nice stuff built on top of it. And if you could stand over there, you'd see the same thing on this side. There's rubble underneath, and then this very well-constructed rampart. This rampart, Larry mentioned last night, has been exposed for 10 years, and it just is not washing away. And the combination of materials and construction technique has made it a wonderful rampart layer. So that's the Iron One, and looking from this way down, part of the moat exposed and the bedrock exposed. And then that rampart in this bulk comes up, and then you can see where the light Nari stones, again, crowns right as it hits the wall. So that, you have to imagine, was the Iron One rampart with those walls. If we think back now to the earlier Middle Bronze rampart, you can see it very clearly here, and the wall is set into that rampart, and then the dirt of the rampart comes down. Then we find, and Jim, if you want to point it out, follow his tracing, go down, there. You see how that breaks? We've lost the nice gray-brown soil, and we actually pick it up again above this bedrock. You can see where Jim is. You can see how we pick it up again. So what's happened, somewhere after the Middle Bronze rampart, we've been toying with different sorts of ideas, and we're thinking it's closer to the construction of the Iron One. Sometime after the Middle Bronze rampart, we had an earthquake, and this bedrock, I don't know if you can see it well, this bedrock separated, and they had to fill this in. It meant that the rampart separated too, and they had to fill it in. This material is the same as what we've got here, and so the pottery has been hard to find in it, and it's been Middle Bronze. So we're still puzzling about it, but it seems to be the best suggestion is that this happened right before the construction of the Iron One system, basically. So you have this repair, and this repair goes all the way down into the crack in the bedrock. Then you notice that the bedrock has broken off again, and Jim is invisible, but you can see it. It's the line right here. And we lose most of the Middle Bronze rampart, except that we're suggesting at this point that we lose this gray soil here. But if you see the layer of brown that goes underneath kind of a rubble layer there, that seems to be Middle Bronze. It seems that what we've got below that is Middle Bronze. So we at least have portions of it. We've got a portion here, a portion that's broken off here, and what seems to be a portion there. Otherwise, we're down to bedrock in this whole trench. Before the Middle Bronze Rampart was built, there was a settlement, a large settlement here from early bronze, and when we have scraped out the cavities in the bedrock, we have found early bronze. The Middle Bronze people came, scraped it off, but left these cavities filled, scraped off the early bronze settlement, and then built their rampart on top of it. Those of you who were at the lecture last night will remember a bit of a discussion about the casemate wall. We have used the language casemate wall since the first discovery of the outer wall here, an inner wall here, and then cross walls. And we've thought casemate walls. The fact that they're not bonding, but rather are abutting walls, has led us to think that these may be prototypes of a casemate wall. And it's earlier than other casemate walls, and so we're using this word proto-casemate, or at least a prototype of a casemate wall. In the one that was excavated last season, and actually 2 seasons ago, a number of store jars were found. This is the square where most of the pottery is coming from this year. We have in camp from Friday's excavations, and Friday was a short day, 52 pails for the field, and I think probably 30 of them are from here. So what you're seeing is a lot of store jars, and you know, we don't know entirely what they contain. We assume, yeah, they do contain dirt. We're assuming that there was grain mostly, and we're not sure what else. But you never know what we might excavate, what we might turn up. One never knows. Are you finding anything here?
Pottery.
Pottery. Anything else? What do you think? And you notice the paving of the floor here. It's very nice, but it seems, is the paving continuing? No. Paving seems to be dropping off as we're going down.
Look at this.
I wonder what that is. What do you suppose? Wow! What do you know?
Wow.
Whoa!
Whoa.
Wonder what that is.
Oh.
Oh, my goodness! I wonder.
Hey, pasta!
Ah, Danish cookies! What was? I think I need to get my knife on it. You never know what you're going to find in Field B. Except for 4 previous seasons of Danish cookies. You never know what you're going to discover.
I'm looking for Field H.
In these 2 squares, these are new this year, and you can see that they've removed a tremendous amount of destruction debris. This has been up to 2 meters, a little higher actually. And if you look at the bulk from that side or this side, it's mud brick, it's roofing, it's second story stuff. We're suggesting a second story with mud brick walls. And all of this collapse is precisely what preserved what we've got down here. And although we're tearing out bulks and it's really quite messy, you can see that we've got a nicely, well, it's nicely preserved wall, but it's not nicely built. This is not a well-built wall. All of these walls that you see were built into this mud brick and not founded all that well. So they're kind of crumbly, and we're careful with them. We do have, you can't see it now, well, you can see part of the pavement here, at least 2 phases of use with these paving stones, what you've got here and then one right below it. We have the same phenomenon over there, and we have it here as well. So there were 2 phases of use of those paving stones. This was once clean, and you could see right here and right here, and then there's another one in the bulk. Flat stones we're assuming were pillar bases, and you have then a wall here, a wall there, and maybe even a row of pillars here. So you had these 2, at least 1 row, and I don't know, Larry, if you've done any thinking about a second row here.
Oh yeah, I have. There's at least 1 pillar base there.
It's all covered up now, and so it's hard to see. But at any rate, we're suggesting 2 pillars, 2 rows of pillars that go from that wall in this direction and would connect with something that you see in Kent's Square. So we're down to the surface. We're down to what's been preserved of this Iron One settlement. The problem is we need another week to get these bulks out of here and really expose it laterally. We wished we had that, but we don't. And then in Kent Square, if you move a little bit farther this way, you can see some nice pavement coming up here, and a room here that is connecting with Carolyn's. And when you come around here, you'll see pavement here as well. And you can, doesn't take much to imagine this bulk remove when you come over here, and you'll see the room outlined here. Then the wall continues there. We've been thinking about this, Larry, I don't know where you are. Yes, we've been thinking about this. That we thought this is a doorway clearly, but we thought it was paved. Actually, those are in a wall line, so this is a wall that's been reused. There's a corner been put on it here, and another one here. Where Roland is, he's on one set of, the pavers are right below him, and then there seems to be another surface. So again, we're thinking two phases of use. Well, if you want to come around this way, what we're doing in Aga and Andrews Square is later material. We've removed some Iron 2 walls, and since we're down to the Iron 1 walls that are here. If you'll notice carefully, right where Julie is, right below you in the bulk, this wall, which is in keeping with most of the orientation of our walls, makes a turn after it crosses that wall line. And that would be because the end of the city is turning around to the north. So we would expect that turn, and we don't know what happens to it once we get toward the north. Next year. We need more than a week for this square.
It just keeps going.
Awesome.
Now, if you want to come on around a little bit more and pass our modern hinge. Go ahead.
It's good to see you're working finally.
66 at 3.25.
Now you can see the standing stone against the inner wall with the maybe Yimkin altar of some kind in front of it, oriented toward it, and then the three stones that would have supported posts, maybe a curtain wall, and then this side of that was the fire pit, a nice grinding stone, lower stone, and a grinder as well in this room, and a storage bin. That had all been excavated before, but the stone had been broken apart and now it's standing again. And then you'll see in Carolyn Square and Vivian's how this wall continues, a nice surface to the south of it, and then on the north side of the square we're into the same paved room that you've got over in Kent Square. It's very nice. The paving goes up to the walls, and we don't know what's happening over there, but this square is going to take some more attention. This is going to take, we'll have to get back to this one next season. No, yes, from Carolyn Square, one of the Iron One Santana.
And there's little quads.
I should also say, you can see the burn by the room over there in the corner. A lot of pottery has come out of there too. But in Deborah Square, and I forgot to mention this, in Deborah Square, where all the pottery is where the human bones have been found, burnt and disarticulated. Is that right? Did I get the right prefix to that?
Ask Judith.
I think. Yeah. So, at any rate, that destruction took that person's life. We've puzzled at the lack of ballistica, the lack of sling stones and arrowheads, but this year we found a lot more, and a lot of them in that room, including that very nice lance point, if some of you may remember seeing it back at camp. That was in that room, so we're feeling more and more comfortable with military assault. We wondered for a while. I mean, you should have some evidences of...
You're feeling comfortable with military assault.
It's this perverse comfort. A perverse level of comfort. All right, any questions? You can see the mud brick from this side in Kent's bulk very nicely.
Where did you cut that big chunk?
It was right here. We don't know this part entirely sure. This certainly, this is. Yes, yes.
What do you think they have all that kind of
So real high here, we had that plastered pool, and that caused a big pit. And all this season, we've been digging around that pit line to try to get down to it, and we haven't quite over there. But you see, they're into the same destruction that we had over here. The destruction layer going down, sloping down that way. And he's talking about a silo here that went down about 2.5 meters. Still iron 2, however. So David excavated over there, Dean excavated here, and Ava excavated here. What did you find in there, Ava?
I found the,
Speak up loudly.
okay. I found the plaster floor, which was in this biggest room, and also in the doorway. You see this level? That's the level of the plaster floor.
Right,
The
there's the
doorway-
plaster.
Yeah. And on the plaster floor, in the same corner, I found the pottery, teacups, and one inside another one, cube, and then jars, and bones. And in doorway there was also cobble floor. That's all.
Okay, and so we're actually at the bottom of these walls here. That plaster floor was the earliest floor in use here, and it went right around in this doorway. Actually, it went under one of the stones in this door jamb. So that's a very good indication, you see, that this door jamb built above the plaster floor is later, right? Okay? So we have to assume that somewhere in this wall are hidden 2 different phases. Now it's your job to come and look at the side of this and tell us where the phases separate. All right? So we had fun and games playing with that. It was like going through a maze, kind of, to tell where the phases were. It hardly looks like there are 2 phases in this wall, but there must be, because that plaster floor goes under that vertical stone. The vertical stone holds up a bigger stone on top. Okay? So we kept having to go around like this, fishing around for the juncture between our 2 phases in this wall. But this room that Ava excavated and doorway are part of a large domestic complex. The pottery, the objects Ava found were domestic. The pottery and objects from other rooms over there we found in earlier seasons were domestic. We have at least 7 interconnecting rooms here, doorways connecting them all, and even a stairway going down into the basement of another one over there. It's like a rabbit warren. We don't have an exterior entrance that we know of yet, but just one room after another. We don't have coherent architectural plan of houses. But these were domestic here. Farther south, the buildings are not domestic. The walls are huge. They've dug deep basements. There are no domestic objects found on the floors. And so we suggest that was a administrative center. The buildings are large, the walls large, everything is large. Over here, smaller, more delicate, and with domestic objects on the floors. So we think we have the administrative center of the Ammonite monarchy that way, the place where the people lived who served as the bureaucrats in that administrative center were in this building and in other smaller buildings to the north. Now in Field B, on the very top levels, we found some small fragmentary walls, not nearly as nice as these. So maybe we have class distinction here. The bureaucrats lived here and their servants lived over there. I don't know, maybe, but it's fun to speculate like that. No foundation trenches here yet, none. They dug deep holes and then built the walls right on those levels, none. This site doesn't have them, or we're missing them all over the place, but we find floors on the bottom, and then immediately below the floors, the founding levels of the walls. So they dug basements, founded the walls, laid the surfaces. Yeah. This wall right along here is the transition from the domestic building in the north with the administrative buildings here in the south. You can see what remains of the stairway right there. The first administrative building was made up of 4 rooms in a kind of house plan we know stretching throughout the Iron Age from the very beginning in the 12th century on until the end. The 4-room house. Do you see where I'm standing? Disregard this wall here, which is a later phase. That wall, right over there, a later phase. But you see this wall that Brian is standing on, another wall going over there, and farther beyond that is another wall with cross walls going between them. Okay? A 4-room house plan has 3 long rooms. 1, 2, and then the third one in this building is subdivided. You can have subdivided walls in these, quote, 4-room houses. And then along the back, a long room. This is the so-called inner room, or it's called that in the Bible in 2 or 3 places. Yeah, that's where they hold their private conversations and keep things quiet. But this is the first administrative building. The floors, again, were right at the bottoms of these walls, and underneath them the destruction of the iron one that we also had over there. So this is the first administrative building. If we go this direction, and the front of it was go from where he's standing there over this way, okay? That probably was the front of the building. Starting from here, okay, which is the southern edge of the 4-room administrative building, we have yet another building. Larger walls, larger rooms, not oriented in the same way. One of our largest rooms right over in here. On the floor we found vessels and so on from the Persian period, the early Persian period. But this is our next administrative building. All right, and now to go into yet our other Persian, or our other administrative building. Lloyd, could you tell them a little bit about Field H? This is Field H from about where Lloyd is sitting, south. So maybe you want to move along a little bit.
Well, there were elements of this wall here in Field A that were uncovered, and also the edge of this wall here.
We can't hear you. I have to speak loud.
Okay, I'll come over a bit. Some elements of the big wall you've got here was evident already from Field A, plus another piece of wall down there that goes down into the deep pit. So as we excavated, this wall emerged very quickly, and this one here parallel to it, both of them more than 1 meter in width, and there was some later use with a big bin that actually went over that little connecting wall there, and there's a jumble here and here. This section down here appears to be a tower. It's such a wide section of stones joined together. On the other side you have cobbled area that had some plaster over it. The section between this wall and the book going right through across what were the 2 squares here. There's also a broken area here where it probably continued originally, and some stones over there that we think are probably also a part of the extension of this cobbled floor here. When you go down into Mary Square, maybe you better come down here.
Yes, this is the famous Mary Square, right?
Only in the last few days have we been able to clarify, by completing the balk removal and then cleaning up the faces, we've found that there is an extension to the huge wall, the biggest wall of all, which is almost 2 meters in width. This little section here is an extension of that attached to it, and it goes underneath the face of this wall here. So that's the earliest use. Next is this phase here, followed by this pair of big stones here that go under this one, possibly as a part of a pre-structure to this tower, or part of the same tower. And then this section up here is the very last use of that wall. A room over here has emerged, and there was a big pot in the corner of that room. This actually appears to coincide in usage. In other words, it's very late. It coincides with the bin that has already been removed from over that little connecting wall down in the far square. So it's basically late iron 2 right through from one end of the square to of the field to the other.
Ladies and gentlemen, breakfast is here, but before we go, I want to introduce you to a honkin' stone. That's a honkin' stone. It's suspicious. We've been wondering, Lloyd, haven't we? This big stone is like those big stones over there, and I didn't talk about those earlier. But that row of big stones is iron 1. My wife was playing around with those stones last time, trying to throw them out. But these are very similar. However, as you will notice, Eva's square here is completely stoned out. It's not that Eva is stoned, but it's stoned out. Well, she can hardly excavate here anymore, except that little corner right there. Wall here, wall here, wall here, wall there. And Lloyd and I have been spending 2 hours trying to figure this out. What wall goes before which wall? Baloney. I don't know. We'll just have to start taking some of them out.
A number of walls, including this one here, appear to have been built in 2 stages, and then of course continued in use after that in later phases. So they have remained in use for a long time, I think.
So for a small field like this to have at least 8 phases already is is quite significant, and these people have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
This is our famous megalithic structure, which Ella has been excavating for, I guess, 4 weeks, and Musa was faithfully helping her up to today. And we, as you heard yesterday, we believe this is a kind of a dolmen. We don't have that horizontal slab, but it could have been removed sometime even in antiquity, because it wasn't robbed. People didn't think it was a tomb. It wasn't a they thought it wasn't a dolmen, and this is why perhaps it wasn't robbed. This is dated to early Bronze 1, so approximately 3000 BC, and we found here about 16 skeletons pushed against the rear wall over here. They were not articulated. Well, there were some traces of articulation, and among them we found how many vessels?
18 vessels in 2 different levels, because we had 2 different levels inside the tomb. First level with these many burials, and inside in this level it was 1 teapot only and 1 little cup, but in the level below with few bones inside it was about 18 full preserved cups and jars.
Okay. As you see, the structure of that dolmen, it's maybe not typical for regular dolmens, but what is common? what is common for them? That just those vertically put slabs, large slabs, and the entrance over here. You may, most probably, the entrance was built over here. We have one, maybe this is a doorpost, something like that, and you see the platform down there. The rock was smooth, and all the structure was most probably put on a platform. We don't know the context of that megalithic structure yet, if it was an isolated structure or it was maybe connected to, I don't know what, maybe to some walls running over here. We have
no, for sure
yeah.
it was connected with with buildings which has at least 2 rooms, because if you look here, you have one plaster floor up there, and on the place where I'm standing, this is another plaster floor which is coming until the wall. The plaster floor was not inside, outside of the houses. They've been inside of the houses. It means that somewhere there should be some enclosure, house or temple, or who knows what is it.
Well, whatever. Any questions? No. Okay, we have very little time, so we'll move to our MB2 cave and then to the cemetery on the other side of the freeway.
So you're down here, paving stones now.
Sorry? Yeah, it's not it's bedrock. It's not bedrock. No, this one, yes, this floor.
So no more skeletons.
I hope. It's enough.
No more skeletons, or you hope.
I don't want anymore.
Now, last week you said, I like doing this, I like digging in this.
Yeah, I like, but do you know how much is documentation? How much documentation?
That's right. Yeah, you've got all the paperwork to do now.
And we are living in those 3 days. Then it means that
You've got lots
who
of
will
work
do
to
it?
do.
In a market.
Yeah, something like that. And you know, we can even reconstruct how they were lying, or even or on the back, or they were like, you know, sleeping. And we found at least 4 children there. 2 of them had small bracelets, and about, I don't remember, but about 15 vessels, complete vessels. You saw them yesterday on the lecture, and you will see them in the camp. Very big jars, juglets, jugs. And today, when we took off when we took the soil off the big jar, we found a juglet inside it in the camp, a small, very nice juglet. When we first saw this structure, everything over here was covered up to this place, something like that. So we only saw that small space, but we saw this part and this part, and we believe that this was, you know, hewn cave. We didn't know that we'll have such nice steps over here. As you see, they lead directly to the cave, and the cave was also hewn, but it's now, because of the roof fall, it's now this misshaped. Well, actually, we didn't finish excavation. That's a disaster for us. We need to leave half of the cave with skeletons just for the next season. So we'll have more skeletons if it is not rot next season.
But you have actually gone to the full limit.
Okay,
of the cave
we
in each
went
direction.
back some 6 meters to over here, and we completely excavated half of the cave, and we partially excavated the other half, the eastern half, and we took the biggest jars from the eastern part, but we didn't get the locus with the very skeletons. They are just there, and with small vessels. The cave has a nice bench, which is a remarkable sign, and a nice, well, kind of cut niche, rock cut niche. We are again in a cave with nicely carved steps, and that cave just today revealed to us what it has covered for many years. What you see here is a tomb with many burials. We actually don't know how many of them are in that cave, because we dig just half of that cave and just a small probe in that half. Muriel is now drawing a skeleton, an articulated skeleton. We didn't find any pottery associated with that skeleton yet. I mean, close to that skeleton. Maybe we'll. We found at least 1, 2, 3, 4 skulls with bones which were scattered around that place, but now we are finding perhaps articulated skeletons. You see long bones over here, here, and here with pelvis. We found here at least 4 skulls. First, second over here, third, and fourth. Bones are very fragile. Before, just a couple of minutes earlier, we drew everything here. You see long bones over here, but what is most exciting maybe are these jars. Well, we picked up this small juglet. Maybe I'll take it. This is a very nice example from Middle Bronze II. All pottery is from Middle Bronze II period. We presume this can be an earlier phase of that age. And what you have here is a jug, larger jug, and jars over here, 1, 2, 3. Well, we suspect that we'll have more pottery just in that direction, more burials, and more finds like that. Well, I mean, maybe some objects, maybe scarabs, other seals, metal objects, well, but we'll see.
In any case, it's 8 by 8 meters, and we're tearing down the balks now. And of course, the good things are always in the balks. So, looks like we have one wall line coming towards you there, and that turns towards the west and runs across the square. There's another pillar base right here, and I'm not exactly sure what more we're going to find in terms of architecture inside. The bedrock is extremely uneven that they built on, or the bedrock that they built on is extremely uneven, with crevices in it and all kinds of crazy things. Even before the backhoe came along, that dropped off rather steeply there to a surface that was more or less level with the surface over there, but it descends towards us here and then ends up in both of these squares in these kind of crevices. This one was paved over with stones. This one was just covered with the hard-baked surface.
When you say paved over here, the
flat-lined
rescue
stones.
has deliberately trying to fill that crack and use it as a floor.
Yeah. This one was not done and handled in that manner, but both of them were fairly clean. They didn't have anything in them but a few iron sherds. Threw all those Hellenistic sherds away.
We had a dry shot.
No, actually, they were very nice to find those crevices, as a matter of fact. So we've also got in that balk, I think, right at the just sticking out a door socket, which is very interesting. Have an internal door in the structure. The external door we haven't found yet. Putting in a probe over there just to test the how this sits on bedrock. Probably do another one on this side before we're finished, but we're not exactly sure where the outside entrance was. Doesn't seem to be any place special. Maybe when the internal arrangement becomes clear, it'll be obvious that it was someplace we can no longer examine. The object finds have been very interesting here. The deposition is such that all the good stuff was under these layers down here, buried fairly deeply. This square on the southeast produced very, very little. This square produced the most abundant finds in terms of pottery, and you can still see a lot of it concreted to the floor there. We'll get that up eventually. We're picking it out piece by piece. It's impossible stuff. Explained to me as leaching, lime leaching up and grabbing that pottery and holding it, but just concreted in. This square on the right here, the northwest square, also was very productive, and that's the one from which so many of the boudoir items appear to come. Lots of little pieces of jewelry and a pumice, a pumice stone and things like that. Haven't located any kind of cooking apparatus yet, but this balk in this very corner has traces of ash in it. And so I'm looking carefully there, but I'm right now kind of disturbed in a way that we haven't been able to locate any of the installations that must have been a part of this.
What kind of pottery forms is Larry reading for? I mean, are you getting cooking pots?
We get the whole range, cooking pots, jars, jugs, pithae, and also some highly specialized vessels, ones that he claims are rare. So he's very excited. We get very, very little of the black burnished stuff, though there are pieces of it. Mostly it's courseware.
So based on that, he's giving you dates of late Iron II, I suppose?
Late Iron II, E-Per. So he thinks it was in the fluorescence in the 6th century, that this was as an outpost from Umayri, because the pottery types are so similar. And that makes sense to me. The slopes here are literally covered with the kinds of rock-cut features that you anticipate. I'll show you a wine press that's close by if you'd like.
Yeah, I would actually. It's the configuration of these things that I've always felt made these agricultural.
Yeah. The other thing that I'm becoming clear on is that there does appear to be a perimeter wall that sort of encircles the site. It's quite heavily buried, but it starts high up on the slope and comes down, and it heads towards the university, and then it turns there near the cisterns. There's several cisterns over in that area. And you can see a little bit of a perimeter wall just over this edge here, right by the sift pile, and it goes down, and it's heading in that direction.
Where's the cistern for this site?
There's one right there. It's either a cistern that's broken or a cave, but the mouth makes it appears to be a cistern.
I've wondered about some of the caves of them being used for wine storage.
Yeah, well, that would be a good thing because it gives you nice 55 degrees year round.
Yeah.
And so I would rather call that a cave than a cistern, but I don't think I can.
There should be both, I would think, around. But of course, cisterns get covered up awfully easy.
Oh, it's bedrock. This would be great for burial.
Yeah, we haven't found any tombs on this site.
Now, Howard's site for the EB tombs was up here, if I remember.
Yeah, there was to the left of this establishment.
They put a. Okay, was it to the other side, south of that?
But it also is fenced in. You can't get here from there. You know, that's the way we used to drive down.
Right.
But it's not possible anymore.
Okay. Gary must have discovered this one initially. I don't remember seeing this one when I did survey.
Yeah. Well, he's been fond of it for a long time.
Yeah.
And we're just lucky that we had a significant deposition here.
I think it's excellent. I really do. I mean, I hope yours excited. I genuinely am very pleased about it.
Oh, I'm ecstatic about it. The only thing that I was missing here that I really longed for were some implements, agricultural implements, and the inventory.
In a small site like this, it's a hit or miss. You probably have to use several of these, but I think if you did enough, you'd probably start getting the bigger corpus.
Yeah, but there are few more to do. I mean, I don't know any more to do.
That are.
I've put probes into all the ones that have the same kind of pottery collection, and there's nothing with deposition like this. Nothing.
Very good.
Anyway, we're taking down that balk today and getting a nice wall, which is wonderful. It's not going to extend because those rocks are from the person who did the nastiness.
Now, my old theory, and I'd be just a quickie, and we got to head back to Umayri anyway. We'll have a chance to talk, I hope, more later. But I have sort of seen these as somewhat equivalent to the 4-room agricultural houses they find from about the same period, over in the West Bank. Now, you're kind of exploring, how these things fit into the surrounding area here. Would you think they could be socially and economically equivalents to the 4? Because you have these nice 4-room farmhouses, they're calling them. They have perimeter walls, they have cisterns, they have wine presses. It's the same configuration, but they're more four-room houses, where we've got more of these rectangular, megalithic kinds of things, but they seem to date to the same identical periods. And I'm wondering if they couldn't be somewhat, you know, if you're going to call these agricultural centers, is that how those things function over there?
I think they probably are kind of equivalent. The one that I know best is Herbert Ross.
That's the one that's published that I, took a picture of.
I don't know how fanciful their reconstruction of the perimeter area is, based on my knowledge of what little remains here. It's probably quite fanciful. But that was a very small estate as they reconstructed it. I don't think there were more than an acre there, or an acre and a half at max. If this thing it goes all the way up to that wall, then we've got 1.5 or so hectares here close by the site, which makes it a bigger complex.
The building, though, is about the same size.
The building is actually 13 by 14, I think, something like that. It's bigger.
Yeah, the one over there. Yeah.
At least the dimensions that are given in the report.
Right. This is more square. That's more rectangular. And I compared dimensions, and of course that's a classic one that's best published. And as you say, how accurately it's been recreated, I don't know. But
this will be the next classic one that's best published.
Okay.
So then we'll have two of them.
More
but the interesting thing about that site, of course, is that among the finds was a lamellic handle, this jar stamped handle, which ties it very explicitly to the 7th century, in which the grapes were gathered and pressed in some manner, whether by foot or by roller, we don't know. And then the wine was, the grape juice was led into this basin here, and from this basin it was decanted into jugs. And you can see these round hole depressions here are very nicely positioned to stabilize a jug that doesn't have a flat bottom, of course, but has a nub on the bottom, so that it can be filled from this collection vat. And the collection vat is nicely designed to include even a sump at the bottom of it to collect the detritus from the winemaking. So it's a beautifully designed rock-cut wine press, and or grape press rather. The product of it was wine, and we were wondering where they stored the wine on site, because we haven't found the wine storage place yet. Anyway, there are 5 of these that we've identified on this one site, with the same basic structure.
You said 5?
5. But you know, clear off a little of the dirt, and you've got 5 more.
Sure, yeah.
Largest reservoir rock cut basin we found in the survey. It's got steps down to it, and since the steps are on the downslope side, I wondered why. And I found out today by putting that probe in, it goes down 1.5 meters.
Oh, really?
So the bottom of this thing angles towards
that
the
direction.
The back side, and so the steps are
coming in
get you in the dry side when it's running low. And so, assumedly, this caught and kept water that was being used, whether for irrigation or more likely for cleaning out the presses, because they had to be cleaned every day. You couldn't put the bad juice in with the old juice in with the good.
Have you traced any drainage channels coming out? I mean, some of it would just be natural, but you wonder if there weren't a little bit of.
Especially on this side where you got that nice.
Yeah,
I think that's a break.
You think so?
Yeah. But it could have been. Yeah, I haven't traced them. The nicest drainage channels we have ever seen, though, are to that cistern over there, where the pump is now. Bishrod is pumping out the groundwater, piping it over and filling a cistern with it, and then using the cistern for his local irrigation. And the tooling is still on the rocks.
Yeah,
too,
you can see it when the light hits just right. Which it's doing right now. That looks very close. You can stop now.
All right. This whole area, including out to about where Lloyd was, it was one time all this one large cave complex. And sometime in the pre-Islamic period, this area here was made into a cistern. It's kind of an oval shape. and it was used for quite a while, at least into the early Umayyad, early Islamic period, they're calling it now, or what's formerly known as the Umayyad period. There's the bottom of the cistern. You can see we've made a big trench through it there. Has kind of a stepped shape, has a kind of a hump in the middle there. And on that hump there's two, the last plasterings there on the top. We pulled out a sherd out of the plaster, out of the top of that, which was, again, Umayyad period, so that dated the last plastering of that. Not long after that, there was an earthquake here, and if you walk around the top, you can see that what you're sitting on there, all of this rock here, we dug up some of it over here as well. All of this is caved in, and at that time, this whole complex went out of use in terms of that. At the same time that the cave was used as a cistern, you can't see it anymore, where we took out part of that bulk there. There is a large tanur, about 1.5 meters in diameter. And over on the other side, maybe you can see where Sam and Marvin are sitting. There's another little square that we put in there on the other side of that wall. There's a large wall. It is plastered up the side of it, and there are two surfaces in there that are made out of just tamped chalk, and in between there's about in places from about 3 to 10 centimeters of dirt. Again, we got Umayyad sherds out of there. So these three things were contemporary, and after the earthquake, that's phase 1. Then there was the earthquake, and this caved in. A lot of the boulders, we found boulders inside of that tanur. Inside that whole little square was filled up, and then obviously you can see all of this has filled up little by little. About 3 centimeters above, in the rubble, above the floor there, we found an Abbasid coin, which seems to date the relatively early part of the fill that started to come in. All of this was open, and wind blown and sheet wash debris started to come down in here. This part went out of use. People started to draw, or not to draw, but to carve these inscriptions, writing, whatever, of some kind on the wall. We'll talk about that in a minute. At the same time, here, you can see about 1/2 meter to 3/4 of a meter up. We took most of it out. But that rock here, there was another large fire pit. The top part of it is still up here. It kind of went around like this. There's about 30 centimeters of ash that you can't see very good because of the lighting right now. But this again is later post-earthquake use. So everything we found in the areas that we were just talking about was Umayyad and Abbasid, or early Islamic period ruins. Last week we had a conference here. They had all these nice pads and everything. Everybody was laying on there. You saw the picture last night at ACOR. And we had these specialists here who took a look at the different, some places you have letters. Yeah, we're missing the cookies and the shy and all that kind of stuff. Maybe I can point out a few of these things. There are a number of, there's just 1 or 2 of these that were able to be read. There's a number of these squares with squares on the end, something in the middle. These are signs that have like the god in the middle of it. All right, there's one somewhere.
Sure you're not an early form of tic-tac-toe?
It is, actually. There's a few signs that are reminiscent of Talmudic. This you can't see is a small version of some of the ones that you've seen at Wadi Rum, where there's a horse and a man on a horse with a lance in his hand. The ones at Wadi Rum, some of them are about that big. This is a very small one. So they're mostly little pictographs, a few letters, and what they have decided that they are is wasam, or tribal markings, camel markings, kind of like brands on animals like we have in the West in the United States, those of you that have seen the Westerns, whether you're from the United States or not. And that these were extrapolated, and now we're only the brand to tell who owned them, but they became kind of a sign or an insignia of the family itself. And so these wasam here are over a long period of time, at least beginning in the Abbasid period and later. Although, as we said, there are a few signs that perhaps are Talmudic and Safvidic-like. Or the theory is now that the people saw these on the rocks. Most of the inscriptions that you see out are on basalt, on a black rock and background where there are chiseled into the stone. And we had a modern stone carver out here, and he says that these were probably chiseled with a basalt, or a piece of basalt in one hand, and perhaps a piece of wood that held it on there. And that they were carved in that way. And so the people here made paint, black paint on the background here to simulate the idea of black basalt stone that they were already writing on or had seen. They saw these different things such as the one on the horse and the lance, and they would copy that, and then of course they would doodle in their own lingo that's on here. So these are bits and pieces of a number of things, but the majority of them seem to be these wasam or tribal marks. Did I miss anything, Stan?
You did a very nice job.